Hi, so I'm an ADHD adult. A normal person would expect me to look sad, upset, angry, disdain, apathy, whatever. I'm actually having a great morning and a lot of things are going right. It's just we tend to not be as expressive. We keep a very neutral face unless it's something very exciting for our system or very horrible for our internal system. So we don't follow like the social cues, the status quo of how we're supposed to look at all times. We're not going to just smile for no reason. We're not going to basically placate you and pretend, because that is what the masking is. And everybody masks, like when you go to work and you say good morning to your coworkers and you smile, that is masking, especially if you don't actually like that person. But it's with everyone and everything in every situation, and it doesn't really matter the environment. And we also wouldn't see like how people see bosses and coworkers and higher figures. We don't really look at the hierarchy of things. We treat everybody exactly the same. It doesn't matter who you are or what your status is. If you treat us good, that's that. If you treat us bad, we are going to stay far, far away from you as much as possible. We have a harder time socializing and getting in with, other people. So we're more of like very skittish, introverted people. But if we're like the kind of people that, like, if you get to know us and we vibe, then some of us, you can't really get us to shut up, especially us ADHD folks who also have the ADHD presenting. Myself, I have the combo ADHD. I was diagnosed when I was young. I didn't get autism till way later in life, because really I started learning about autism in 2010, but they didn't even include girls into it until 2013. But when I was learning about it, I'm like, wow, this really sounds like me. And it was. It's just nobody kind of thought that way back then. I did. So yeah, let me make more light for you, because a lot of people don't like videos unless there's like a ton of lights. But as an autistic, I don't like a lot of bright lights, so I usually have smaller, more like task-based lighting. I don't need a bunch of lights on me, and if that is such a huge issue, then whatever. I wanted to talk about the 4 F's, Polyvagal Theory, autistic meltdowns, shutdowns, and burnout, and how they're alike and how they're different. So let's start with polyvagal theory. That is the 4 F's, your autonomic nervous system. This is a human normal reaction to things. It's just autistics and ADHD folk, our dial is kind of just turned way up. So more minute things are going to affect us more greatly and more occurring. So the 4 F's are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So with fight, the 4 F's are the primary survival responses, and they're triggered in the autonomic nervous system in reaction to danger, stress, even if it's just a perceived danger or stress. So these are instinctual. It's a physiological response, reaction, and it's designed to protect us in threatening environments, like when we were hunters. We have different body autonomic states. So fight is a defensive response to confront a perceived threat directly. Some of the physical signs will be like increased heart rate, muscle tension, adrenaline surging. Some examples would be like arguing, hitting, standing one's ground. And it can be triggered when the brain perceives that the threat can be overpowered or defeated. With flight, this is an attempt to escape or avoid the perceived danger. So the physical signs would be like quickened breathing, restlessness, desire to flee. If you can tell by the way I'm breathing right now, I'm more anxious about talking on video. So I'm getting a heightened response of flight because I'm like, this is nerve-wracking. So when, public speaking, especially for an autistic, is very hard, and I have selective mutism most of the time. Some examples of flight would be like running away, avoiding confrontation, leaving the situation, wanting to just get away from it all. And it can be triggered when the brain perceives escape as the safest option. Then you have freeze. And that is a response of immobility or paralysis when the threat feels way too overwhelming. And this is kind of like the playing dead, like when animals play dead against, something that's hunting them down. That's how we feel. So physical signs would be like slowed breathing, numbness, feeling stuck, dissociation, and we kind of just go in our shell almost. Everything just stops. So some examples would be like zoning out, being able to move or speak, which is a big part of the selective mutism, because when our ability to cope is too great, our body just can't handle it. And this can be triggered really when the brain determines that neither fight or flight is a viable option. And then you have fawn. This is masking. So this is involving people pleasing or submission to avoid the conflict or harm. Physical signs will be like excessive compliance, difficulty setting boundaries, feeling small and invisible. Some examples would be like apologizing excessively, agreeing to things to avoid confrontation, or seeking approval. And this can be triggered when the brain really believes appeasement will neutralize the threat. Trauma can lock individuals into one or more of these survival states, even when there is no immediate danger. So understanding the 4Fs can help you recognize their patterns and work towards regulation and healing. So knowing how to cope is identifying your normal triggers, recognizing the situations that activate these responses, like being around a certain person, being in a certain environment, being at work, just different things that like it's more likely to have a trigger. Autistic meltdown. That is an intense emotional and physical response to overwhelming stress. Sensory input, or really just frustration. Things are just not going your way. Things on the car breaks, you wake up late, you can't find your things, everything just feels so overwhelming that you're like ready to have like you're crashing out. Basically, you are emotionally crashing out because there's just too much to cope with. But this can even just be a small thing. Usually we have maybe a little bit less emotional resilience in a way that these can happen more often. And it's not a tantrum. It is not a tantrum. It's not about gaining attention or anything like that. It's really an involuntary reaction when our ability to cope becomes way too overloaded. So some characteristics of a meltdown would be like having just loss of control, especially for us PDAers, having some sense of control because we can feel very helpless, not being able to, it's not about having our way, but just like having some sense of like autonomy in the situation can cause us to really get dysregulated. So you won't be able to like regulate your emotions, your actions, your body during the meltdown. Some of these can be like crying, screaming, hitting, kicking, self-injury, self-harm. Others might shut down entirely and become completely unresponsive, which is really a shutdown. So some triggers would be like overstimulation, bright lights, loud noises, repeating loud noises, like say like a fire alarm. Sudden changes in routine is the biggest thing for me that will get me really going, because say you did all these things and then all of a sudden your plans just go whoop, and then it's like, then what do you do? Normal people have a better resiliency for this, but it can really overwhelm us. When things just happen and they're sprung on me, I get very overwhelmed. I'll start crying, have a meltdown. Or communication difficulties can really do it. Or just really cumulative stress can really all lead to a meltdown. It's the same thing as like anybody else having, a mental breakdown, a MenTB, but we're just more prone to them. So the duration can last from a couple minutes to several hours. And the thing is, it takes a lot out of you to have a meltdown. After you have a MenTB, you're feeling very drained, very guilty afterwards. You just need some recovery time. You need solitude. You need very calm environment and activities or lesson activities. Having a safe space to go, like your bedroom or laying in bed, or being around people that are supportive and non-judgmental, offering comfort without demanding explanations or giving solutions. We literally just need to physically calm our body. You can use gentle communication. More than likely, when you're in that heightened emotional state, no kind of logical reasoning is going to work. So sometimes just sitting there and being present. Sometimes when my son is getting, into a meltdown, I hold him down, and he will not like this at first, but I'll rock him and try to get him to like self-stim a little bit, because he's co-regulating with me, and the biggest thing is I have to be regulated so that he can be regulated. The more regulated I am, the more regulated he can be, because he's using my emotional regulation for him to feel safe. So things like weighted blankets and stimming and any other like self-soothing tools can help. And this is not about like giving out punishments for meltdowns, because they're not intentional at all. It's not a tantrum. It's more of just responding with compassion is really all it is. Just being a safe space for yourself or for your child or whomever. This is especially important, like if they're trying to injure themselves and they're hitting their head, smashing into things, or other self-harm behaviors. We have to kind of stop the harmful behavior and try to give them a better coping tool in that moment for them to actually regulate. Autistics are way more often to self-harm, just because our nervous system is just turned on blast. If I could describe it as an autistic adult, it's kind of like your adrenaline is on 100. Like you just got boosted with a bunch of testosterone and adrenaline, and you are just overwhelmed. Especially the testosterone, and that's the fight reaction, where we're just like this, we're throwing our arms, we're kicking, we're just like your adrenaline is so high, like you have to have a safe space to calm down to. And if somebody's screaming at you, yelling at you for the behavior, that's not gonna make you regulate, is it? like telling somebody to calm down. That does not work. Help them calm down, because obviously they can't calm down by themselves at this moment. What should be a common sense thing to just help somebody who's having a hard time, instead of punishment or anger, or making, escalating the situation. That's the last thing you want to do. An autistic shutdown is really just a response for just overwhelming stress, sensory input, emotional strain. Emotional triggers will be a big one. With the shutdowns, we can really withdraw and become less responsive with our environment or with people. And it's really just like a getting up in your shell and just pushing it all out, because you just literally can't deal. And this happens a lot with big emotional things or traumatic events, or think of it like a severe depressive episode, and it's all going to manifest differently, right? So a big thing about it will be the withdrawal. So they may stop engaging with their surroundings. They can retreat mentally, emotionally, physically, all those things. Usually it'll kind of go down a line of mentally, then emotionally, then physically, or whichever. You're gonna have the decreased responsiveness. They might start avoiding more eye contact if they can do eye contact. They'll speak minimally or not at all, or they'll appear distant or zoned out. They can sit still, curl up or lie down, and really it's just like our body shutting down to conserve its energy. We're basically going into a full survival mode. And when we're sitting still, it's really all of our muscles are tensing up in our entire body, almost like an internal panic attack. And we get so stiff and paralysis and just like stuck there, like we were just frozen in time, just like we are unable to move or speak or make out good sentences or tell you what's going on. A lot of triggers can be like sensory overload. Social pressure is a really big one. Emotional triggers, unexpected changes, or just the accumulated stress can really lead to a shutdown. And shutdowns can last anywhere from minutes to hours. I'd say hours, average, would be the average thing. And it depends on the intensity of the stress and the environment. You definitely become frozen. You're not even able to process thoughts or communicate or act or do anything, and it is not a choice, but it is a natural response to feeling overwhelmed. It's like the way your body would feel like you just like lost everything and you're in grief and shock and you're just like, oh my god, kind of like gone, just frozen. That's how we feel when we shut down. So it can also make you very tired, emotionally drained, frustrated with ourselves, especially, which can cause us more of like this shame spiral to stay stuck in the shutdown. The recovery really takes time, space, and most importantly, reduced demands. You want to take off extra responsibilities, burdens, stresses off of us so that we can, try to gain back our energy. Creating a safe and quiet environment, minimizing sensory and social input. Avoiding pressure for them to respond is a huge one. Just be patient and allow them to come out of their shutdown naturally. The more you try to push it, the more you're kind of going to push us back into the shell. It's like trying to get a turtle head to poke his head out, but you keep scaring him with loud noises and a bat. We're not coming out. You're going to offer comfort and reassurance. Let them know they're safe without overwhelming them with conversation or by touch. Like for me, when I am overwhelmed and all that, I do not want people touching me. I already like don't like a lot of touch. But in those moments, I'm just like, everybody get away from me. We need a big bubble around us, basically. And just respect their needs. Some people may prefer solitude and calming activities. Some people may prefer to, have like people hug them and just hold them, and just strong pressure can be very calming to some. A big thing with both of these is you can feel trapped or embarrassed or guilty when it's happening in public. Maybe not in that moment, but maybe after the fact, especially with, adults and older kids may feel this, as we've learned more social cues. Recovery is really important. Exhaustion is going to be a big thing, so let them have solitude. Food is a good one that will help bring us back. Me, when I'm in that space, I cannot eat. I'm too anxious, and even wanting food, thinking about food, smelling food, I can't deal with it. But some people can turn to emotional eating, and some people will do the opposite. All of these things we will try to stop it as much as we possibly can, but it's kind of like one of those things where when we start rumbling, which is like it ramping up this tension building stage, once it like breaks that line, a lot of it we can't really control anymore, depending on how bad it is. Autistic burnout is a state of intense physical, mental, emotional exhaustion. We are just completely kaput. We are done. It's usually caused by just prolonged stress, sensory overload, just the effort of masking or suppressing our autistic traits to fit in societal expectations. It can significantly impact our daily functioning and well-being of just like having to basically play pretend and mask all day. It can be very exhausting. So it can cause a lot of extreme fatigue, and it won't improve with rest. And that will really affect our physical and mental energy. We can have a loss of skills, skill regression. We can have temporary difficulty with tasks like communication, executive functioning, self-care. Even some things that are usually manageable for us will just seem like the hardest thing ever. We're going to have increased sensitivity to sensory input, emotions, or stressors, lights, sounds, really anything. It's almost like this like super hearing, like Superman hearing, like everything just gets turned up way too loud and you can't turn it off, which is why noise canceling headphones or, earmuffs, anything like that that can help us keep down that sensory input is very helpful. Withdrawal, retreating from any kind of social interactions, responsibilities, or any kind of stimuli. It's really caused by like chronic stress or prolonged exposure to stressful environments or people or demands without adequate support. The sensory overload, a lot of it is just because we're having unmet needs. It comes from a lack of accommodations, people not understanding or not having enough recovery time to self-regulate. So it's kind of like running on empty and there's no way to recharge yourself. So you're much more likely to be overwhelmed and unable to cope with even simple tasks. It's kind of like being awake for like an entire week straight and you have to give this presentation and you have to, do all these things at the house and do all these things, and that is going to, you are gonna just completely have this panic attack and then just crash. It's just this huge crash. And you're going to feel like you're failing and you're going to lose control of your life and yourself and like how you feel. Burnout sucks. It can take, a couple days, a couple weeks, months, years even. There's been years that I've been in burnout recovery that like I just cannot pull out of it because the demands are too much of what I can handle at that time. So we have to have a lower demand lifestyle at that point. Biggest thing is going to be rest, solitude, reducing masking, allow yourself to just be your authentic self without judgment, having support, seeking support. But if you're like in burnout and overwhelm and all that, most likely you're not going to seek support because you don't even have the energy to advocate for yourself or even have the means of telling somebody like I'm not okay. And that's if they can even be verbal in the first place. Prioritizing essential tasks, usually self-care like showering or eating or brushing your teeth, just like absolutely basic needs stuff, and only doing non-urgent responsibilities as well, like gentle movement, rocking, swaying, dancing if you can, mindfulness activities, breathing activities, and just having like a creative outlet, or if you have a good like low sensory type activities like crocheting or something that you can focus your mind and your hands with, because using your hands and mind to calm down is really the best way to do that. So you have the ventral vagal state, which is social engagement and safety. It's activated when we feel safe and connected. It supports calmness, social interaction, and communication. Our sympathetic state, or fight or flight, is activated in response to danger or stress. And really just the energy to prepare for action and escape, which is going to be your, adrenaline and whatnot. Then you have dorsal vagal state, which is freeze or shutdown. And that's activated when the threat is just too overwhelming and fight or flight isn't possible. So that leads to immobilization, disconnection, or even collapse. The brain has this subconscious ability to detect safety, danger, or threat to life without even a conscious thought. It's a natural response. So it determines which autonomic state we enter based on internal and external cues. So that's why you need the co-regulation. And humans need connection with others to regulate their nervous systems, especially young kids, because they don't know how to do it for themselves yet. So having a safe and supportive relationships and environments will help them stabilize their nervous system and also promote resilience because it builds trust in being able to do so. And it's going to influence your heart rate, your digestion, your emotional regulation. The ventral vagal brain supports really the social engagement, those calm states when you feel like you can actually engage with things. But the dorsal vagal, that's going to be all your shutdown responses. Enough trauma and stress is going to break down your autonomic nervous system, and then you get stuck and you're going to enter dorsal vagal. Some good things to do is like trauma talk therapy, but I would even suggest somatic therapy would be the best, or EMDR, which incorporate principles of polyvagal. So you're gonna have meltdowns, and then that's gonna turn into shutdowns if the coping is too great. Then, if you're having enough meltdowns and shutdowns for prolonged periods without resources of coping, you go into burnout. Completely shut down, your body is shut down, your mind, everything is shut down. So the best thing you can do is support the autistic person in coping. And hopefully this helped answer some questions.